Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Mamie Kanfer Stewart. Welcome to Savvy Broadcasting Life Unscripted. I'm so grateful to have you here today. I'm really excited to talk about your latest book, Momentum, Creating Effective, Engaging, and Enjoyable Meetings. And as we said just briefly before we press the go button, people are so overdone with meetings, Zoom meetings. Oh my gosh, make them go away. But you're going to share some ways that we can really make them more effective and enjoyable, because there are times where meetings are absolutely necessary, but how can we get the most out of them and not just make them a drone on and just exhaust ourselves with the Zoom thing. But before we go there, please share with our audience just a little bit about your backstory and how you came into the business world.
Absolutely. It's so wonderful to be here with you today.
You betcha.
So I got into the business world in a very roundabout way. I went to art school and decided I didn't want to be an artist, and ended up working in my family business, where I got to experience what wonderful, engaging, and productive meetings were like. And when I left a few years later and went out into, quote, what I call the real world, I discovered that meetings were actually a terrible, unfortunate thing that were happening in so many organizations. Mm-hmm. And the more I talked to people about meetings, the more I discovered how big of a problem and how pervasive of a problem it really was. Mm-hmm. And I just kept thinking, it doesn't have to be this way. It really doesn't. Meetings can be wonderful. They can be a wonderful way to collaborate. They can build momentum in your organization. And the way to do that, it's not rocket science. And so I set down a path to be able to help put an end to bad meetings.
I love that. Oh my gosh. And it's funny. I have meetings with some of my associates, and it's kind of like we do the weekly meetings. And so we come on board and we're all looking at each other, and I'm hoping that some of them have some feedback to share with me, what's going on with their business. How can, we get things revving and going? And they're like, I don't really have much. You, John? And I'm like, guys, did you not prepare? But yeah, it's kind of like we all just come together because this is the same time, same place every week. We have to meet. We do this thing. But what have you found that makes a productive meeting? And what are some of the pitfalls you're seeing with businesses that they're not doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And your experience is so common, unfortunately. So I'm going to say a couple of different things that I think are really essential and kind of ground laying for setting yourself for effective meetings. So the first is to realize that meetings are not an event. They're actually a cycle. There's a before, a during, and an after. It's not just the time you spend with your colleagues in Zoom or in the room. There's actually a whole phase around preparation that's both for the meeting leader and for the participants, so that everyone can enter the meeting ready to do the work. And then the follow-up, right? To make sure that whatever comes out of the meeting gets shared with the right people, that the action items get followed through on. And so as we think about meetings as a cycle, it helps us get in the right mindset that we can't just show up and expect to have a good meeting. It actually happens by design, not by, happenstance. The next piece of that really is what you do in the preparation phase. And the number one trick, it's not even a trick, the number one thing to do to transform your meetings is to create a desired outcome for each meeting. And let me explain what this is. Okay. A desired outcome is what the meeting will achieve. It is so easy for us and so natural for us to say, I'm having a meeting to review or to check in or to brainstorm or to problem solve. And those are wonderful verbs and wonderful activities that can happen in a meeting. But they don't tell you what the meeting's going to accomplish. And so we have to start to shift the way that we think about meetings as accomplishing something. And if you try to write that out into a sentence, the easiest way to do it is to fill in the blank. At the end of the meeting, we will have fill in the blank. We'll have a decision. We will have an alignment on this really complicated situation. We will have a recommendation to serve up to a committee. We'll have a list of ideas for further exploration, or a list of questions we need to answer. And when you do that, you can realize sometimes we don't actually need this meeting, because we couldn't come up with a good desired outcome. We couldn't come up with a reason of why we're actually trying to meet. And so if you don't have a desired outcome, you definitely don't want to meet.
I love this. Recently, I was meeting some of my associates. They're working on a new program they're uploading into their their company, and no one, you know how it is, new system, you're all like, how do you use this? But they're like, we want to discuss our issues with it. I'm like, great, let's talk about it. So they were kind of just flailing like, oh yeah, I'm not really sure how to do this, I'm not sure how to do that. And so it's like, why don't we just come together with, like you were saying, a list of what we're having issues with, instead of just talking it over, putting up the screen and saying, don't know where to go. Great. Let's put those things down that we don't know how to do and have the people that know how to do it say, here are the list of what we need to know how to do. Show us those particular items. And then the next time we meet, we actually have a prescribed thing to work through.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
if you were really clear, right, you could imagine in that same meeting, if some people were walking in thinking we're just generating these list of issues, and
Yeah.
other people are walking in thinking we're going to get trained, and other people are walking in with something else, you're all trying to do something different, which makes it very hard to have a cohesive and productive conversation. But
Exactly.
if whoever is leading the meeting says, at the end of this meeting, we all want to have the knowledge or the competence and the skill to be able to do these 5 things independently, now everybody knows exactly what you're getting out of that meeting.
Oh man, I love that. That is so great. I think every business owner needs to get your book.
I agree.
Now, tell me about launching Meeteor. What is it about? How does it help businesses? Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
So Meeteor is the business that
I'm
I
sorry, I
run.
said it wrong.
No worries. So Meeteor, we are a little play on words because it's Meeteor. We joke that our tagline is meetings with impact. And I started this business to help teams have effective meetings. And so it's the way that I work with organizations. I teach about effective meetings. I run trainings and I talk about meetings. I talk about the impact that meetings have on your culture. And it's one of the things that we kind of overlook because meetings are just so common. And we don't realize how meetings are actually a microcosm of your culture, how people engage in meetings, how they show respect to each other, how they have constructive dialogue, how people disagree, and whether there's psychological safety to share differing viewpoints, right? All of that is a reflection of the bigger organizational culture. So if you can get your meetings right, you can actually do a lot to create deeper engagement with your team members, with your employees, and transform the way that people have an experience within your company.
Wow. So is it kind of like a set up like Zoom, or is it totally different? Can they use it to go through meetings through your system, or not really?
No, we don't have we did have a software, but we don't have a software anymore.
Okay.
Now, what we learned in the process of having our software was that software is great, but it's not enough. Really, it's about the human skill and the human mindset. And so we pivoted the business a couple of years ago to really dig into the skill building, the culture aspect, and the mindsets around meetings to help people have productive meetings regardless of what software you choose to use.
Oh, that's great. Because it doesn't matter where you show up, whether it's Google, Zoom, or wherever, just as long as you're making the most out of your meetings. And you said the most constructive thing getting started, which is having a plan to get started, which is I found in 90% of my meetings over the past 30 years has been like, we just show up because this is the time we show up every week, and we just sit here and, all right, what are we all talking about today? And you mentioned something else, a safe space and a culture where people can freely express themselves, not feel like maybe to get negative feedback or not being able to feel safe to express their opinions.
Absolutely. I mean, meetings are one of the places where we ask for engagement. We ask for people's opinions. We ask for their strategic thinking. And it's not always comfortable to disagree with your colleagues. It's not always comfortable to share a perspective that you think other people are going to judge you for. And so when we plan ahead, we can create the kind of activities that we need for people to feel safe to share those things. So, for example, right, if you're using an online tool, you can do like a Google Doc or other kinds of online polling where people can submit answers anonymously. So you could ask the group to poke holes in this idea. You know, what do you think about this idea? Like, let's think of what's wrong with it and ask people to type in on their device, and people can share all kinds of critiques or all kind of differing perspectives without it being attributed to them.
I love that. So the person getting the feedback also doesn't have to feel attacked because it's just people, and you shouldn't, because the basic idea is that you could have a great idea, but maybe it needs some tweaking. And if we just did a little bit of this or that, then it's an amazing idea, but just a little bit of tweaks from all the different team members, now we can really run with this and make it constructive for everyone.
Exactly, right? That's why we have these conversations, is to enrich each other's thinking, because we're smarter together than any one of us is independently.
Oh my gosh. And I found that we'll sit here and I'm batting my head over the, on the desk. Can't figure this out. And someone will just say one thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? That just makes it so much easier. And you're right. Someone will just see a slightly different angle to the issue, and boom, it's solvable in two shakes. It's not a big deal. But, we could go on for a long time, but I want people to find out more about you, how they can find, work with you, and also get their meetings revving, and also get a copy of your book. How can they do all of that?
Absolutely. So the easiest place to go is to the website meeteor.com, meeteor.com. You can find the book there as well as on Amazon. I also host a podcast called The Modern Manager, which is everywhere you listen to podcasts. And I talk about meetings quite a bit, but along with many other topics around collaboration and building a strong, healthy team.
Awesome. Now, I just have to ask you, Meeteor kind of sounds like the stars and whatever. Are you a big fan of solar system, stars, space, all that stuff, or not really?
It was not the driver for that name. I think all that stuff is super cool, but we were trying to figure out a way to kind of encapsulate this idea that meetings don't need to be like a boring rock. They can actually be something that is like having real power. And meteors were just they're beautiful, right? They have movement to them, and we could get our play on words with the word MEET in there. So it was the right name for us.
That is awesome. Everyone go to meeteor.com, which is meeteor.com, and get momentum today so you can get your meetings pumping and constructive and effective. Thank you so much, Mamie, for coming to Savvy Broadcasting today. I just really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thanks so much, Christina.
Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more savvy episodes and savvy biz tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.